Hey guys, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vardhan, and I'm of course excited to be here on Edureka live with you guys. And in this, in my previous session on Selenium, I explained what is data-driven testing, and I told you how to implement it using WebDriver, right? And in today's session, which is the next in the same Selenium series, this is also a very interesting topic. And what I'm going to teach here is all about page object model and what is page factory in Selenium. Okay, so in my previous session, I explained why it's important to break your test case into two. What I explained last time was to break your entire test case into one class which would contain the test scenario and the other class which would contain the actual data and that which would pass the data, which would actually pass the data during testing, right? So similarly in this session, we again break the entire test case into two parts. And one class here would be used for, which would be used as the page class. And the page class is nothing but the class which contains the locators of all the web elements in the web page, which is going to be used for testing. And the other class is going to be the actual class which would do the testing, right? So that will be the test case, and the other one would be the page class. So that's what I'm going to teach you in today's session. And yeah, this implementation is called the page object model, and I will talk about its benefits, and of course you'll be able to start designing your own test cases this way in the future. So if you guys get any doubts during the session, please feel free to put them in the comment box, and either my team or I will myself answer them for you. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy Edureka Live for the next 45 minutes to learn what is page object model and page factory in Selenium. Now these will be the topics I will be covering today, but before I tell you anything more, I want to first of all understand, are you all familiar with this concept of page object model? Can you all please give me a quick reply in the chat box? Okay. Anyways, moving forward, I'm guessing that there'll be some of you who will know what it is, and some of you will not. Okay, I've got an answer here. Some people know it and a little bit, and some do not completely. They're not familiar. No problem. As you can see, I will start the session first of all with an introduction to what a page object model is. Okay, I will tell you why it's useful and how exactly does it work. I will also talk about what a page factory is. I will also talk about what a page factory is, and after that I will give a demonstration on both how to implement page object model using page factory and how to implement this same page object model without using page factory, right? So let me get started with the first topic for today, and that is why use page object model. Now to help you understand why the page object model needs to be used and adopted, I'll first present this problem statement to you. Okay, now consider there's a web page which you are testing, and assume that there are 10 elements on that page. Okay, and along with that, let's say it also has links to other pages, like a link to a login page from the home page and a link to a blog page and etc. A couple more pages, and let's say you have written multiple test cases in which the elements are used and a lot of tests are performed on them. Okay, now if the element locator of any of these elements or all of these elements changes, then what will you do? Okay, you'll have to probably change the locator of every element, right? Because you have to change that in every test case, that also. So that's the deal. I'm pretty sure you people agree with me, correct? So, and initially, the test, if it's a small application, it would look, the test code, the script would look something like this, and you'll be locating very few elements, and you'll have to make the changes in just probably a few lines, like what's highlighted over here. But when you work in the industry, you will not be dealing with such small applications. You will have hundreds of web pages, each having numerous web elements, and the same web elements can also appear in more than one page. Okay, and to test the different functionality of the different elements which are there in different web pages, you might have to write 100 different test cases, right? So that's one challenge. And now if you want to make changes to the locators what will you do? Because in this case there are probably 100 test cases, and you'll have to make the test, the change to the locator in all those cases. And at times you will also have a scenario where you will be changing the locator of the same element in multiple test cases, because it might be used in multiple scenarios, right? So you have all such situations. At that time it's going to be like really tough, right? It's going to be very tedious, modifying these test cases and changing the locator. It's going to be frustrating and boring. So to eliminate all these issues, we have something called as the page object model. And the page object model, it basically helps us write flexible code, and it helps us also maintain it in a very efficient way. Okay, so you will have, besides that, you'll also understand why it's industry preferred when I give you a demonstration. Okay, but before that, the only thing that you need to note is a page object model is not a framework. Okay, a lot of people have the misunderstanding that it's a framework. It's not. It's just a design pattern to restructure how your test case is written. Okay, and what kind of restructuring is done in this case? As you can see here, the restructuring is done in with respect to the test case being divided into the test and the element locators, right? So the element locators are separated from the actual test scenario, and basically these element locators will be present inside the page class, and this page class will be accessed during runtime by the your test case. So that's why you need to use page object model. And to explain what exactly that is and give more details, I will go to the next slide. And yeah, as the definition says, a page object model is a design pattern to create an object repository for web UI elements. And the object repository that we're talking about here is simply the page class, right? If you look at this image here, we have the it simply says we make a combination of page class and the test case. So these both in combination help us achieve the POM design pattern. Okay, so page object model is also generally acronym to POM. And the page class here will contain all the locators of all the web elements that we need to test in our application, and whatever test scenarios are there, what data needs to be passed to that particular element, those would be present inside the test case. So the case would basically be calling the page class whenever it's needed, or whenever it's needed, it just calls it. So that's how this whole concept works. Now, speaking of the page class and the test case, now speaking of them in detail, these two contain what you see here on the screen, right? So your page class, first of all, it contains your element locators, like I said, but it also contains something called as the methods which call these locators. So you will have various elements on the web page. You will have probably a text box, you might have a link to another page, you might have various other things, you might have a radio button, you might have all these things, right? So you will have a locator to identify that element, but what kind of action is performed on that element? Are you clicking on that, or are you just passing some data into some text field? All these actions, right, those are called as operations, and there's a method which we use to perform those operations. So we have these two items basically present in our page class. Okay, and similarly in our test case, we have the actual test scenario, like I've also explained in the previous session. And besides the actual test scenario, you will have the calls to the methods present in the page class. And when you make the call to the methods over here, you will also send the data that you want to you want to pass as parameters for testing. Supposing it's a login page and you want to send in your email address or password details, then that you will have to pass in through these method calls. Okay, so the actual test would be here. These would be executed, and when these are executed, the method calls would be made along with the data which is parameterized, and that goes to the page class. And here, when these methods are called, the operations are executed by using the element locators over here. So it would locate the elements using the element locators, and then whatever actions are needed to be performed, they would be performed. So that's how the page object model works. So guys, any doubt with respect to what is a page object model, how it works? Any doubt, I can answer it right away before I get my hands dirty with showing you a code. Now, let me just explain what I was saying. I was just saying that the login elements.java that you see here, right? This class, I'm going to use this as my page class. Okay, now this page class contains all my WebDriver, it contains all my elements and all my locators for identifying those elements. Okay, and this test case class, this is where my actual test scenario is present. Okay, now to help you understand what code I'm going to present to you, let me first of all go to the login. Let me explain this class of mine. Okay, which is my page class, and this class basically contains three different let's say it contains three different parts. Okay, now this is the first part, which has my the three different element locators, and then this is the second one, which is a constructor for instantiating my driver. My driver is actually instantiated from in this particular class, but I'm importing that same object driver object over here, so I'm just creating a constructor for that. And then finally I have three different methods for making calls to each of these elements. So if you remember from the previous sessions, or in general, what we do for locating any elements is we use the command driver.findElement, followed by we have this part, right? We either use by name or by ID or by XPath, and then we send whatever keys we want to send. So it's a similar way, but what I'm doing here is I'm just using the by class to create and send the data as a method call. Okay, so for each of these three different login fields that we'll have in our web page, the username, the password, and the login buttons, right? We have three different elements. So for each of these elements we have three different methods, and I'm using the driver.findElement function to identify my first username field, and I've used the by class to specify the class name. I'm saying identify the element called username by the name tag. Okay, and this I'm storing it over here in this variable, and what I'm doing is I'm just passing this same username fields here. So whenever there's a function called made, it would indirectly go and pick up this particular element and send the keys whatever it receives. Okay, and this key is again received at this method as arguments, and it's received from the other class. And similarly, we have the we have the password field, right? So for the password field, we have the password which comes in as arguments, and this would be sent as again parameters to my this variable. Okay, and here the by name that you see here, I've again used the name tag to identify the password field from my web page, and yeah, the data would go into this, and whatever details are there, that would be input. And similarly, the third one would be the login button, right? So the login button, we won't have any details, any text going in, but we would just have to click on that login button. So for that, we are just again using the find element to identify this field, and we are just using this find element to identify the login field, which is again defined over here. And by making the call to this login button, we are just performing a click. Once the element is located, we are performing a click operation on this particular element. Okay, so that's what my page class is doing. And the other thing that you need to note is the constructor. So if you remember, the constructor basically has the same name as the class. Okay, and the constructor I'm using here because what I'll be doing from my test scenario is that I'll be creating my object for my web driver over here. Okay, you guys should of course know that whenever you're working with Selenium, you have to specify, you have to set the property and then say which driver you want to use. If you want to use Chrome driver, or if you want to use Gecko driver, and all these things. So I'm creating the driver over here, the object for the driver over here, and this I'm passing as arguments to my page class. Okay, so that all this data would go, and my driver would execute successfully. Okay, that's what I'm doing. But one thing which you might find strange is that I have used this particular object. I've used this object. I've created a new object for this class instance. Okay, and then I've sent this driver over there. So this would ideally mean that my web driver should be defined as a global variable, and then inside my constructor I have to define it locally, because the web driver instance which I have created over there, that would come in this function call, and I'm instantiating this. I'm using this command to instantiate this driver to the same driver which I'm creating here. Okay, so the global driver I'm creating, I'm setting that same value which comes in from the local driver. Okay, so that's the only thing which you need to note. Okay, to help you understand, I've given driver 1 for my local driver for this particular constructor, and my global variable of course is it's just going to be driver. So this is what you need to understand from my page class. And going to my test case, here is where it's the interesting part. So basically I have two different fields which I need to fill, right? I have my username and I have the password field. So to send the values to both those fields, I need to send them as method calls. And since in my page class I have three different methods for each of these elements, I need to make separate method calls. Okay, now if I want to make a call to any method from a different class, then I have to create an object of that class which contains a method, right? So in our case, this is the class which contains a method, login elements. So I'm creating object instance of this class, and my object name is login. And yeah, while creating the object, I'm of course giving the driver. This is what I explained earlier. But the next line, that if you can see here, I'm making a call to the methods. Okay, so there are three methods: user element, password element, and login element. Okay, you can verify that here also. So if you see, there is user element here, password element, and login element, and each of these methods indirectly make calls to the locator, right? So that's what I'm doing. I'm saying login.user element, and I'm passing my username, and then I'm making a login.password element to call the password element method, and then I'm passing this credentials. And of course I'm not passing any credentials to my login element, right? My login element just needs to be clicked on. So the operation that I'll be performing here is dot click, whereas here it was dot send keys. So yeah, this is what basically my code is going to do. It's just here I'm just going to create the object instance, the driver instance, and then I'm going to perform these operations to pass my data from here to my page class. Okay, now let me show you a sample of that by executing this code. Okay, I'll show you how it works. So as you can see, when I've executed, the Chrome driver has opened. This is the page I want to test, and yes, I've logged in successfully, and now it should quit. So this was the same page I showed my test on in the previous session. Okay, this is the URL, and you guys can also perform any if you want to practice automation, then you can do it in this URL. Okay, now let me just pull up the console and show you the results. So it says that the method verify login has successfully passed. Correct. So this is the method verify login which was passing the credentials, and yeah, this is successfully passed. Test runs 1, and there were 0 failures. Right. So this means our test ran successfully, and yeah, this is how I wanted. This is what is an example of page object model, and this is what I want to explain. So, however, here we've not used the concept of a page factory. Okay. So to implement page factory, I'll first go back to my slides and give you I'll brief you more about what a page factory is and why a page factory can be used with the page object model. All right. So basically, a page factory is an inbuilt class in Selenium for implementing the page object model. Okay, and you can also think of it as a library which has the necessary functions to make calls to the appropriate page class or the methods inside that page class. Okay, and to use this page class, we need to just import this page factory package. Okay, that's a Java package, and you can do that. And the important command and the benefit that, of course, that you get with this package is this init element statement. Okay, this init element command, because this in combination with something called as @find by annotation, we can use these two in combination to directly pass our elements. So locating our elements in our page class is going to be easier for us because we'll be locating our elements which are there in our page class from the test case, right? So when we have this, when we import the page factory, and then when we have the init element statement, we can easily identify what elements are there from the page class. So we can easily choose, and we can easily pass details and all these things. So that's a, it's a slight benefit that we have when we implement page factory. Okay, and yeah, this comes with Selenium, so all the more reason to use it. Correct. And besides that, we can also use this @cache lookup annotation to store any of these elements in cache memory. Supposing you perform any test on certain elements, then if you want to store them in the cache memory, then you can just use the @cache lookup command after that particular after the find by annotation, right? And when you do that, you have a very fast test, right? Your test cases will execute faster, and you'll get it immediately. So in large scale application, this would be beneficial, where you will have multiple test cases running every frequently. So that's the thing with page factory. And yeah, I think I've told everything that I needed to tell, right? So the difference between using a page factory and when you're not using a page factory is just that you'll be using the driver dot find element, and then you'll use the by tag, either by name or by ID, by XPath. You'll be doing that. But with the, when you're using page factory, you just use @find by annotation. You don't need to give driver.find element all the time, and yeah, you don't need to make multiple method calls. So it's a little bit of an advantage. And of course, you need to import the page factory package for that. And yeah, cache lookup helps you make your test cases faster. So there's one more topic of this advantages that I want to tell. Okay, so advantages of this is yeah, by now I'm sure that you would have understood what advantages are there. Number one is maintainability. So you can maintain your code in a very efficient manner. You have the test case separated. You have your method calls separated. So whenever you want to change any locator, right, then you can easily change the address only in that particular page class, and you can just maintain your test case separately. Because otherwise, if you have it all together, then by the in the default pattern, then you will have a problem. You will have to make the changes in multiple places. So this way you maintain it in a better way. And reusability. So reusability is a factor where in applications where you need to make use of the same element in multiple test cases. So let's say that you have 2 or 3 different page classes, okay, and you have 10 test cases, and your each of these 10 test cases, you're testing out different functionality. So at this time, if you want to make use of the same class, and if you want to use a combination of the same elements, then at that time the whole concept of reusability comes into the picture. Okay, you can just make the function calls, or you can make the method calls, and you can execute your code easily, so you'll not have any problem there. And speaking of flexibility, that's the biggest benefit, right? So it's very flexible, as in you can if you want to remove a particular feature, if you want to remove a particular element, then you can do that by just deleting it from the code. You won't have any other dependency anywhere else, right? So similarly, even a test case, if you want to really execute a test case, you can also leave it to the side, because it will not be affecting any other test case, because no other page class will be affecting any other test case in combination with this. So that's one advantage with respect to flexibility. And yeah, the code would be optimized for better use, right? Your code would be more smaller, and it would only perform what what you expect from it. So you'll not have that many bugs or errors as you can expect. So that's another big advantage with page factory. So these are the things why people use it in the industry extensively today. And in general, whatever you've seen all these days, right, by using the driver.find element and then using the different tags, that's a very primitive way. That's not exactly how it works in the industry, because when you're actually working for a company, you will have a massive application which would have like hundreds of test cases. So at that time, this is the way forward, and this is what is actually needed. And if you also want to crack interviews, then page factory and page object model is a must know topic, and this is probably the one topic from where you will have the most number of questions asked in, right? So that's the thing. Now now that I've told you this, I can simply go to my Eclipse IDE and show you a demonstration of page factory. It's not going to be very different. It's going to be a slight change. That's it. Okay, so I'm just going to delete these things, and as you can see, this is my package which contains these two classes for page factory. Okay, so I've said page object model with page factory, and let me open these two files. And yeah, the web elements.java that you see here, this I'm going to use as my page class. Okay, and this class is my test case. It's very similar to the previous code. The only difference is in this part where earlier I made calls to three different methods, right? I did those things and I had 3 lines, but instead I'm just making one single call to one method over here. Okay, and besides that, over there I made a, I created an object instance of a class straight away. But here I am creating an object instance of the class, but I'm doing it with the help of a page factory package, and that is the init elements. So this is what I was talking about earlier, right? So init elements can be used to easily locate your elements. So when @find by is used in your page class, so that time init elements can be used in combination with this to identify the elements. So it's a little easier. Now you will understand that better when I explain this, so just hold on till then. And yeah, even this page class over here is pretty similar. It's the only difference is in these lines where I'm using the element locators, right? So earlier I used the by class, and I used 3 different methods to call those to call that by class, right? But here I'm using @find by, and when you specify @find by, you will automatically, you can choose which tag you want to use, whether you want to use ID, or if you want to use name, or if you want to use XPath or CSS or class name. All these things you can mention over here. Now since I'm using name, I've simply specified name here, and inside double quotes I've specified the name of my web element, and that is username, correct? And then the important thing is you have to say web element. So this is a keyword, and after that, if you give whatever you give here, that would be considered as the name of the variable where it will be getting stored. And similarly, I've done the same for the other 2 elements. One is the password and the other is the login field, but I've used a different method over here. I've done it in a different way. So here I've simply said name is equal to username, or you can say XPath is equal to so and so. But in this case, I've used this function called how.name. Okay, so I can have either how.name or how.id or how.xpath. I can use any of these things. It's very similar to name, but it's just that in the industry it's a preferred method, because yeah, the how package, it also comes in use in various other places. Well, of course I can't show the uses right now, but that's how it's used. But it's as per your comfort. You can use either the name, the ID straight away, or you can use it with the help of how.package. So you can say how.name or how.id or how.xpath and all these things. And the syntax goes like this. After you say which tag you want to use, you have to say using is equal to, and then you need to specify what is the value of that particular tag. So the value of my name tag, if it's username, then in this case I have to equivalently specify the value. But since it's my password field, the name value of my password field is password itself. So that's what I've said here. And similarly, my login button, right, it has the value of login. So again, I've just said using is equal to, and in double quotes you specify this, and then you say web element, and then you create these 2 variables, and then your locators would be ready. Okay, what I've done after that is simply I've created another constructor, which is again the same, and I explained this earlier also. It's because we'll be getting a driver from our test case to map that to our global driver, which we've instantiated inside this page class. We are using this constructor. Okay, and we are doing it using this call, right? And yeah, finally over here, instead of having 3 different methods for the 3 different elements, I've simply have one single method, and over here I'm making calls to each of these elements. So I've defined username, password, and login as 3 different elements, right? So web element was the keyword I used for creating these 3 elements, and them I'm calling them over here. I'm just saying username dot send keys, the user ID. Okay, and similarly I'm calling password, which is recognized here, and I'll be sending the keys of my password. And in case of my login button, I would identify the web element and I would perform a click operation on that. Right now, what this is where you need to I need to go back to this class and explain how the function call is made. Okay, so let me just go there. This you would know, so I'm just gonna quickly go and explain this part of my code. So what I'm doing here is I am making a call to this method. Login method is the name of the method, right? So here I'm making a call and I'm sending the user ID and the password. So that you can understand over here. But to send this, we need to instantiate a class. We need to instantiate an object of that class, right? So that is what I have in my previous line. So over here there is the name of the class where the method is present, that is web elements, and the method name is locate elements. That's my method name. And instead of creating it as a new Java object, I've just said use the page factories init element method. Okay, and here I'm passing my driver and the web element dot class. So I'm sending the bytecode of my class file. So the bytecode of my class file, I'm sending it because there are various elements that are there which need to be located, and it would use the the class file to locate this. So that's the reason we use this here, because otherwise if you don't specify the dot class file here, your execution would not happen. So along with driver, you need to make sure that you send the dot class file of your class which you want to use for locating your elements. Okay, and yeah, quite simply I'm just using the class name dot I'm just using the my object name dot the method name. So and I'm passing these credentials, the username and the password credentials, and I'm just for our sake, for convenience sake, I've putting my thread to sleep and I'm closing my driver. So it's a very similar implementation, and if I hit the run button, I can show you a demonstration of this. Okay, I have a question here from Kumari, and she's asking which is more efficient, using with the how tag or name or XPath. Well, Kumari, see, in general, you can just use name or ID. Okay, that's the easiest. But at times, they might change and it might not always be available. So XPath is something that's going to always be there for every element. Okay, so XPath you will definitely have in every element. But if you do not have, if you don't have the tag, the name or ID, if you don't have these tags, then you can use XPath in that case. Okay. Yeah, and how tag can be used in combination with that. So that's the thing, Kumari. So, any other questions? Okay. So, seems like my output just instance got closed. So I'm going to run the command again so that I can explain what's happening, guys. In fact, when you run the command, so it's the same thing that's going to happen, right? Your browser is going to open the fields are going to get populated with whatever data you pass in, and then I've logged into the application, and then it would close. Yeah, so it's the same output that we got for the previous test case also. And yeah, it says test runs by 1, failures 0, and login verify was the method that was executed, right? It was executed successfully. So that's how page object model with page factory works. And earlier I also explained how page object model without page factory works. So it's you can use any one of the methods. So page factory is just that in some places you will have certain benefits if you're using page factory. You will have shortcuts, but yeah, whatever helps, you can use that, right? Whichever is more convenient to you, you can use that particular technique. Okay, so Kanan is asking, why do we use constructor in page factory? Well, yes, Kanan, the same reason that I specified earlier. So by using the constructor, which has the same name as the class name, we are saying that a particular object instance from another class is going to be needs to be instantiated in this particular class. Okay, so if you look at our case, what we have is we need a web driver, right? So no Selenium test case would be executed without a driver, correct? You need to instantiate a Chrome driver or a Firefox driver. So the driver instance over here is set with this keyword, right? So driver is the name and it's set over here. Okay, I'm initiating Chrome driver over here. Okay, and I've this is where my exe is present for my Chrome driver. Now this particular driver object can be used only inside this class, correct? I cannot use this over here in the web elements. This is a different class altogether. I cannot use that driver over here, but all my web elements are present here. The locator is present here. The method calls to these elements are present here in this class. So for this purpose, what I'm doing is I'm just whatever my driver objects instances, I'm just passing that over here using the constructor. Okay, and the syntax for using a constructor is this. You gotta say this dot driver, and this is what you specify over here. So globally what you declare, you can have if you have driver 100 over here, then you have to also change the name appropriately over here. So let me give you an example. Okay, so I can change it this way, so I have convenience here, correct? And then similarly whatever I'm getting in from the class, that I'm storing over here, which is coming in as arguments, I'm storing it as driver 1. Okay, now this one I'm using locally inside this particular constructor as driver 1. So I'm basically instantiating what driver object I'm getting, that I'm instantiating to my driver 100, which is declared globally inside this particular class. So for conversion from local to global variables, that's why we use constructor. So if you guys if you have more doubts on this, then it's important that you get your core Java concepts cleared. All right. Okay, so I have another question from Afsar Ali. He says, can you please show me using @cache lookup? Absolutely, Afsar. So to execute cache lookup, let me just make things simpler here. I'm just gonna and this is where you add that line, cache lookup. Okay, so in my case it's not going to make a big difference because it's a very small application, but in general it's going to bring a lot of benefits if you have a big large scale application. So the cache lookup, this line is what you need to add to every single web element, right after every single locator, indicating that it's going to be present in your cache memory. So let me just import the cache lookup package. So yeah, now we're good, right? So now if I execute this, it's probably going to be a little faster, the element locating technique. You can't visibly see it over here, but yeah, it's that's how it works. Are we clear, Afsar? Okay, Kumari says, can we put init element in the constructor? Kumari, no, we don't do that. Okay, we use the init elements separately and we use that as a method call. And Harinder says, just like after a framework, we can understand it easily for testing any website. Yeah, Harinder. So it's not a framework actually; it's a design pattern, but you can use it for easily understanding how testing happens on any website. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all the comments that I've got. I think I can just conclude today's session on that note. So I'm gonna just quickly go to my slide and wrap up today's session by showing you this conclusion slide of mine. Okay, so we spoke about why a page object model needs to be used. I showed you that with the problem statement as to what problems would occur if you don't maintain a page object model type, this kind of a pattern. and then we saw how we can do it, right? What exactly is a page object model? How do we perform the operations there? How do we divide it into two different classes? What do we store in the different classes? And then I told you how a page factory can be used inside, along with a page object model, because page object model can be used in two different ways. By simply a simple page object model where you're not using page factory, and also in another way where you are using page factory, which is provided by Selenium, right? So it's a Selenium library which they provide. So I've shown you both, and I've of course shown a demonstration of both page object model and the page factory in Selenium. So yeah, that brings us to the end of this session here. But before I conclude, I just want to quickly go here and show you a couple of more things. So this is our Selenium landing page, course landing page, and here if you're interested in learning our Selenium from Edureka, then you can go to our landing page and check out our details here. So you have the badge details, you have the price details, you have all these details here. Okay, so this is the URL. You can check it out here. And since you guys have been in our live session for so long, we also give you this opportunity to avail an exclusive discount on any course that you buy from Edureka, right? And you will have to go to this URL, which one of my team members would put in the chat box. You can use that, and if you fill out this survey form over here, then you have you'll be eligible for this exclusive offer, which others are not, and that's because you've been in the live session for so long. Okay, so go ahead, make use of it, learn something, and grow knowledge. And in the meanwhile, if you're also new to Selenium, if you don't know anything, and if you want to get started from scratch, then you can check out our blog series. We have a couple of blogs here along with the interview questions blog, which would probably help you in understanding which would help you in clearing any interview that you have, right? So you can do that. And of course we have a YouTube playlist also of Selenium, which most of you might be aware of, but if you're not, check out. We have plenty of videos here. You might want to gain more knowledge going through these videos, and most of all, click on the bell icon that you can see next to the subscribe option, so that you'll be notified of any live session that takes place in the future. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it. And guys, thank you for being such a good audience. So we will come up with more live sessions like this. Do subscribe to our channel, like, comment, and share our videos, and it'll be a pleasure to have you on board with us. Alright guys, thank you, and happy learning.